Welcome to Business Reporter's Future of Risk series. I'm Rachel Hicks. To understand the future of risk and what it means for companies today, there are some fundamental questions that need to be answered. Why is managing risk now at the top of the board's agenda? How should companies be thinking about it? And what are they getting wrong? How should CEOs protect their personal brand and reputation and that of their companies? We've all seen plenty of examples from Facebook to Pret-a-Manger where share price and the reputation of the CEO and the brand have taken a hit as a result of a poorly managed crisis. Equally, companies such as Tylenol, Lufthansa and Virgin Galactic show how organisations who have managed a crisis effectively can come out stronger. We've invited Herrick Bond-Gunning, CEO of global risk consultancy SRM, to discuss the answers to some of these questions. Good morning, Herrick.
Good morning.
When we're looking at CEOs and their boards and they're trying to understand the risks that they may face, what's changed?
Well, we like to begin and think it's really important to begin by understanding why some of those risks that were of less concern previously are now having such a dramatic impact on the board, on the CEO in particular. Fundamentally, what companies are really trying to grapple with is, and some to a greater degree of success than others, is this shift in societal expectations combined with unprecedented levels of access to information and to handheld devices. And that imposes huge increases in transparency levels on companies and on their boards so that people can really see what they're up to. And the expectations rise at an exponential rate as a result. And that's the pressure that we see because of this hyperconnectivity that we see companies under. It results in them operating in an environment that is really a supercharged catalyst that accentuates every element of risk in their organisation.
So to what extent do you think companies don't understand the threat to their reputation and how that can impact their company?
I think historically they've possibly believed that they could get away with it because the court of public opinion hasn't been able to see exactly what's been going on. They also misunderstand the impact their decisions around their supply chain and who they're using within their supply chain can have upon them and their reputation. And those are the bits that are much, much harder to control. And those are the bits that companies need to be thinking about in terms of their ongoing monitoring, but also their response to things that are slightly outside their control, but will have an impact on their brand.
Where are organisations failing, would you say?
The first thing they're doing is they're just ignoring the fact that they are likely to be facing these sorts of risks and quite frankly likely to be experiencing some form of crisis during their tenure as a CEO or as a board. And it's this element of ignoring the realities in front of them that means that when they are faced with risks that turn into crises, they're unable to cope with them properly. It's all about speed and time, and they simply don't have that in today's environment because of this hyperconnectivity that we've been talking about. It also means that when they do try and respond to a crisis that's in front of them, they are not understanding that every single word and action is going to be forensically examined across all sorts of media and social media, and primarily by their stakeholders and the general public.
So in that case, how can companies build their resilience to risk?
They need to start by identifying the risks that sit within their organisations and understanding what the risk tolerance is within the company so that everybody knows what to expect and what to do in the event of managing risk to prevent it from becoming a crisis. Once they've done that, they should then monitor the risks that they're facing. And I think it's important to monitor the risks that their peers in the sector would also be facing so that they can do this horizon scanning and see what might be coming down the pipeline towards them. And then the final piece is always about preparation. You've got to do your homework, prepare, practice, because if you don't, it's the equivalent of not taking a mock exam before going to do your final exams. You simply won't be able to cope when it comes to dealing with the crisis in the heat of the battle. So if cyber is top of the risk register for companies, it's to sit down and think about, right, how are we going to deal with a breach? We haven't talked much about the regulatory environment that companies are operating under. The GDPR puts huge pressure on businesses and just adds to an extra layer of transparency. Practice a breach. And then fundamentally, they should be thinking about other forms of risk transfer, for example, insurance. AXA XL have got a new policy that's just coming out next month that provides $25 million worth of coverage around the prevention and the response to crisis. And those are the sorts of things that should be in mind.
Taking this a little further, if the worst does happen and a crisis hits an organisation, how should they respond?
They should start by assessing the situation, but not obsessing over getting 100% of the information. They then need to activate the team, and the team need to understand what their roles are. So everyone should know this in advance. After that, they should start thinking about the situation itself. How bad is it? There's always a temptation to try and see the best in the situation and assume that it's not going to be as bad as it may well turn out to be. Our advice is assume the worst, and then you can rein in back from there, because that helps you rebalance the conversation. And then the final part is think about your values. Think about the core values of your business. Ultimately, it's going to be something around doing what's right. So don't get wrapped up in legalese. Come out with a statement in plain English that explains what's going on and helps swing the conversation back towards your control.
How do you, at SRM, work with companies to make sure that they've built their resilience and they are prepared?
Our focus is to give them time. Every single business has got a slightly different thing that they're doing. There'll be different risks that they're facing, but without some of the things that we've already talked about, they will not have time to A, prevent a crisis from happening, or B, respond.
So what 3 things do you want people to take away from today?
I think top of the list is they need to assume that this will happen to them, and therefore, as a result, prepare for some form of crisis. In an ideal world, they'd prevent the crisis from happening in the first place, and therefore, by monitoring and horizon scanning, they'll be able to prevent risks from becoming a crisis. And then the final piece is obviously to practice. Practice going through a crisis scenario and seeing how you respond.
Eric, thanks very much for joining us today.
Thank you.